Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video we are going to be talking about episode 4 of the brand new FX original series, which is also available on the HULU streaming platform, which is of course Shogun. And episode 4 is titled The Eightfold Fence, and I am super excited to jump into this one because so much stuff happens in this episode, and honestly I've been away for a little while, so it's really fun to be jumping back into Shogun now, and we're just going to continuously talk about each episode now, hopefully get one out every single day, and we will complete and finish the series. And so with that being said, let's just go right ahead and jump into the episode. This one opens up with what appears to be a messenger sending or delivering a message to this certain group of individuals, or to this certain place, this certain community, this certain culture, wherever it is he's delivering a message. Either way, that's how this episode opens, with the messenger delivering a message, which we will find out very soon in the episode what that message is, of course. And so then we come back to Taranga and of course and his crew, Blackthorn, and of course Mariko Yabushigai, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I apologize if I'm butchering his name, but either way, they are here and they are arriving. As you can see, their boat, and the special effects in this episode has been absolutely phenomenal. It was really nice to see FX really step up their special effects. If I'm going to be honest with you, I would say this series is pretty well on par with HBO, with anything from Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon and all those great TV. But overall, the special effects just looks absolutely phenomenal. So as you can see, Taranga and his ship is arrived with basically all of the characters that we have been following. And then we come to this scene, which is of course Fuji, who who's here, and she is sort of, I believe it's here, she is being told that she has to serve Blackthorn. I think that's what's happening here. Maybe I'm getting mixed up in a previous episode, but I'm pretty sure here Fuji is being told that in order for her to serve Taranga, with the Japanese culture, they are very loyal. They really believe in their rules and their laws, and they really believe in serving their ruler, or their lord, so to speak. And so in this case, Fuji is a part of Taranga's, clan or family, whatever you want to call them. And so here she's being told that in order to a part of her serving him, Taranga, is that she must basically become, basically Blackthorn's caretaker, I guess you could say, to some degree, or wife, so to speak. It's almost like they're giving her away for marriage to Blackthorn, even though Blackthorn is not really interested in her, at least not in that sense. But one thing, at least not in the sense that he's not trying to sleep with her, he's not trying to marry her, but I do think that he would actually take care of her and protect her and all that good stuff. So and I do think that if she's going to be assigned to be with Blackthorn, I could see there being sort of like a love triangle between Blackthorn, Fuji, and Blackthorn and Mariko. But who knows? Maybe she will grow on him. I would assume that she'll have to be like taking care of him, probably cooking for him, and doing all basically everything that the wife would do in that culture. So she gets assigned to Blackthorn. And so here then, of course, when we actually see a scene on the boat, we actually learn now what that message was, what that the messenger said. Taranga says that he sent a letter of his resignation. Now, if you can remember, the letter of his resignation means that he's basically no longer protected by the council, which means he's pretty well open now to whatever happens, so to speak. He's now very vulnerable because of the fact that he has resigned. However, it's also very important to remember that Taranga is extremely intelligent. In fact, I would say Taranga is probably the most intelligent of them all that was on that council, or a part of that, whatever it was that they had, that council, which was like sort of like had all the head of the different families, all the clans, all the cultures, and all that stuff. Well, it seems to me like Taranga is probably the smartest one of them all, at least in terms of tactics and tacticals. He's really good at using the law bending the law to his own will. He's actually following by their rules, but he knows the rules so well that he knows how to manipulate them, and he knows how to use it against their will. So, the fact that he has sent a letter of resignation tells me that this is a part of his plan. I do think that this is going to play into something a lot bigger in the future, and I wanted to take this beautiful screenshot here because just look how magnificent this CGI shot is. Well, not even CGI. I would imagine that most of these people are probably practical effects. I don't know if every single one of them will be practical. The ones in front are for sure, and I would even make a fair argument that probably even some along the shoreline are practical. Maybe they're all practical. I don't really know, but either way, the shot looks absolutely beautiful, and it looks absolutely flawless, and this series has done a great job at showing these big moments like this. And of course, then Taranga comes in, and it was really nice to see how they actually respect Taranga. They're all cheering for him. They're all, sort of, they have this like almost like a battle cry. And really, I think ultimately what it comes down to is that it's just this community showing Taranga their allegiance and their alliance, showing that they are strong and willing to fight for their lord and do whatever Yoshi tells them to do. Now, what I did find very interesting is that Yoshi does leave here right away. He does not waste any time. Pretty well the moment he gets here, he just drops off basically all of our main characters, and then he takes off again. And I think they said, I believe they said that he's actually going to Edo, I believe, because or maybe they're in Edo. I can't quite remember, but either way, he's leaving to go somewhere else. But of course, I would assume that he will return eventually, or either that or our characters will have to go to him. Either way, he basically drops everyone off that we've been following, and then he moves on to a new community. And so here is the first time that Blackthorn really has been getting a lot of freedom, we'll say. And so the first thing he does, the moment he gets a little bit of freedom, is he decides that he's going to leave or go out and try to commandeer the ship. And of course, when he's trying to leave, he's told, no, you're not allowed to leave. You need to come back. And so he learns here that although he's quote unquote free, he's not really that free technically. He's still not allowed to leave. He still has to remain here with this group and with this culture. But I guess you could say that he's more free in the sense that he's not locked up in a jail cell. But I guess he's still very much a prisoner. And whatnot. And so they end up telling Blackthorn, though, even though he's not allowed to leave, they do give him a really good headquarters. As you can see, Mariko, or is that her name? Mariko, I get mixed up in their name. Yeah, Mariko ends up showing him to this place, and this now is to be his new quarter. So no longer is he in a jail cell. Now he has basically this entire house, and I would assume that in this Japanese culture, this is probably like a very nice place. As you can see in the background through the doors, he has a really nice yard, great big tree, sort of here in the middle. It's all fenced in. You can see all that here in the photo. So it's very likely that this property that he has, this building, is probably actually pretty high class. Seems like they really are taking care of him. And I believe this is also here where Mariko introduces Blackthorn to Fuji, and this is where basically she tells him this is going to be your wife or your caregiver, whatever you want to call her, and he basically refuses as we expected. But at the same time, I do think that he a part of me thinks that she's going to grow on him. I don't know that they'll get close enough where they will actually be like a man and wife, or if they will just simply become really close friends. But I do think that she is going to grow on him, and I do think that he might even protect her because, his way of living is very different than the Japanese way of living. So I do think that something will happen where he will eventually have to, I don't think that this relationship is happening by an accident. We've been following Fuji right from the very get-go. In the very first episode, her husband sort of gave his life for Lord Taranga and all that kind of stuff, and also her child. And the fact that she's still here and now she's this widow who's now forced to sort of marry Blackthorn, I don't think that that's going to be an accident or a coincidence. I think that will play a bigger role later on in the series. Now, it does sort of play a big role even in this episode, but I do think it will become a bigger role down the line in the future. And so here we see a screenshot where it's translated. It says, "Who leaked word of the barbarian ship to Taranga?" Of course, here I think what they're referring to here, if I can remember correctly, is I believe they figured out that there's a mole or a spy or somebody here who's working against Taranga and working for Ishido or Ishido. I do think that. I think that's what the significance of that scene is here, is that they're finding out that there's a mole, or maybe they're researching, trying to figure out who the mole is, investigating, and whatnot. But we don't really know who that is right now. All we know is that there is somebody amongst the crowd who is working against Taranga. And so then we end up coming back to Blackthorn here. Now it's nighttime, and somebody gives him a package, or what appears to be a package, and of course he ends up opening it up, and it turns out now that it's actually his guns. And this is very significant. Now this is a very big step forward for Blackthorn, because not only now is he technically not really a prisoner, I mean, he is kind of, in the sense that he's still not allowed to leave, but one thing, one really big significant part of this sequence here, or this scene, is that they now trust him to have his own weapons. And this is a really big step forward now, because Blackthorn, not only are the Japanese showing that they trust him, but this might also allow Blackthorn to trust them a little bit more, and he might be a little bit more willing and open-minded, we'll say, because as we know, for most of the series, he's been pretty vulgar and pretty against this Japanese culture. As we know, he's European. He's not really fond of their culture and their way of life. But this might actually encourage him to maybe dampen it down a little bit, put a damper on his attitude, and he might actually get a little bit of authority, in the sense of, I feel like he might actually step up now, because now he's seeing that they do trust him with the guns. He might even try to use these guns in the future to save somebody, potentially even Fuji. I would not be surprised if he has to save Fuji at some point. So it'd be very interesting to see how that goes. And so the moment he gets his guns, literally the very next day, he ends up pulling his weapons on one of the Japanese guards or lieutenants, whatever he is. I think he was the same Japanese lieutenant who actually took Blackthorn and his crew in I believe in the beginning, when they boiled one of his crew alive and killed him and boiled him alive. I believe it was that lieutenant or something that ended up doing it. And so now Blackthorn pulls his guns on this on this person, and of course, they're all getting ready to draw their swords to obviously fight against Blackthorn. But Mariko sort of calms down the situations and actually manages to convince Blackthorn to hand his weapons over to Fuji. And because she tells him that whether Fuji loves him or not, she is a strong believer of the culture and of the rules and the way of the land, and she will give her life for him and for his weapons if he's willing to actually give it to her. And so he does. He hands him over to her, and of course, Fuji does not disappoint. Because the moment Blackthorn gives Fuji the weapons, then the samurai dude, the lieutenant guy, ends up telling her to hand over the weapons, and then she draws the weapons on him then and says no, that she's not going to give it to him, which once again shows her loyalty. Even though she's obviously not in love with Blackthorn, she probably doesn't really feel much of anything for him. It does show that she does follow the rules, she does believe in the way, and she will protect him and his guns with her life, because that's just the way that it goes, and that's what she was told to do, and that's just their way of life. And so I just thought that was a really cool sequence, and it was really cool to see her get that moment as well. I love seeing these little kind of side characters get their little moment to shine, and Blackthorn's reaction to this is he's like, good girl. So it's almost like, it's almost like, he's trying to reward her, as if she was a pet or something, right? So it was just a really funny, the whole sequence was just really funny. The scene was just a really funny scene, and I really enjoyed it. So then, of course, then the next day, of course, Blackthorn is called to the military, I guess what you would call their military or their training quarters, whatever you want to call it, and Mariko is here, or Mariko is here because she is the translator, and they want to know about his war tactics. So this is a big reason as to why Blackthorn is here. He's here because they wanted to give him 6 months to train a section of the army, and of course they're asking him, what are your battle tactics like over in Europe, because he's from England, and they're like, so what's it like over there, what are your battle tactics? They want to know about the wars that he's fought in, and of course he has never actually fought in a war, so he doesn't really have a whole lot of experience in that sense, and he even really doesn't have a whole lot to offer them, at least not right away. And then he comes up with the idea, I guess just on the fly, that maybe he should teach them how to use the cannons on his boat. And so when he actually mentions that to this, training quarters and to this sort of little training council, to these military personnel, they actually laugh at him. They're like, cannons are no good, they're inaccurate, they're bulky, they're no good for nothing. What could you possibly do or show us with the cannons? But Blackthorn is able to convince them of using these cannons, and he's actually able to convince them to allow him to give a demonstration. And so they ends up wheeling out one of the cannons, and he ends up opening fire. Well, they set up a target, and then of course, he lines it up with his knowledge on how to use these cannons. And of course, when they shoot it, it actually takes down 2 or 3 targets at the same time. The targets are in line with each other, and he's able to hit them all. And this actually ends up piquing the interest of the Japanese, because they have never been able to be accurate with the cannons. They've used the cannons before, but they were never able to make it that accurate. And of course, Blackthorn, being a sailor and somewhat of a pirate, maybe even, he knows how to use these weapons, and he's quite good at it, actually. And so they agree to let him, this basically becomes his assignment. He's going to train them this section of the military on how to use the cannons and how to use them accurately and efficiently. And so then, I think it's later on that same day, him and Mariko ends up going out to this absolutely beautiful location. Once again, as you can see, the setting, the background, the cinematography is absolutely beautiful, very cinematic, and very movie quality. And he actually experiences an earthquake for the very first time. He's never ever experienced one of those earthquakes before. I guess being over in England, that's not a common thing. Apparently it is pretty common down in Japan, and so he experiences this, and he doesn't really know what to make of it. Like I said, it's new for him, but it's just a cool little sequence that I just wanted to throw in there, just for the sake of showing that this is new to him. He's not used to witnessing these little earthquakes. And so the next day, of course, he starts training, and as you can see, Mariko has a little diary, a little journal, because Yoshi, or Taranga, that's just his first and last name, Yoshi told Mariko to basically copy down everything that Blackthorn is doing. So she's supposed to take notes and record everything that he's doing. I'm assuming she's going to also record the progress in the training and everything. So she's just recording everything that he's doing, so that eventually Yoshi will be able to use it either to his advantage, or maybe even just to read it for the sake of gaining a little bit more knowledge himself. But of course, while they're out training, one of the leaders on behalf of Ishido ends up coming, and of course they end up basically showing their dominance, I guess, so to speak. And they're like, hey, why are you guys doing all these military drills and practices? Seems like you're preparing for a war. But fortunately, Yabushigi, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Yabushigi is able to talk them down, and he's able to basically get them. They come here to tell Yogishibi that he needs to return to Osaka, and of course we know that's he's going to end up being punished by death or whatever. Like, he's going to end up being arrested by Ishido. They're probably going to end up killing him or whatever. But he's able to talk them down and convince them to stay overnight, and so that they could actually see a demonstration of what Blackthorn was doing. But there does be a little bit of conflict here between Taranga's son and, of course, Ishido's the guard, the military personnel that showed up on behalf of Ishido, which I believe they came from Osaka. So he's having a little bit of conflict here with Taranga's son, because Taranga's son is like, why are you here? For what reason do you need to come into our village? What reason do you need to come in on our land? Why do we need to show you this presentation? As you can see in the translation and the words, it actually says for what reason. So Taranga's son is not a big fan of them coming in, but they sort of don't have a choice, in the matter. So They do end up letting them in, but like I said, it's more so because they don't really have a choice. Now, later on that night, now I do think I can already tell, you know, I could tell already in the episode, before the episode even finished, the moment that Taranga's son sort of intervened like this, I knew right away that there was going to be, he was probably going to step in at some point, which of course he does by the end of this episode. So you can tell that even though Taranga is still in charge, he does still have a little bit of ambition himself. Seems like he is trying to make his fathers proud. You can tell that he is sort of, showing off his authority. He's like, hey, I'm his son. I'm in charge here. And whatnot, excuse me. So, it was pretty predictable. That's the only downside of it this episode. I did find that part of it a little bit predictable. But either way, later on that night, when we come back to Blackthorn's quarters, Mariko is still here, of course, because she's the translator, and of course Fuji is here, and Blackthorn actually gives Fuji his guns, and he gives it to her and tells her that she can keep his weapons, and that they are really good pistols. They're very accurate. They're very fine pistols, a very fine piece of weaponry, and he gives it to her so that she will be able to protect herself. And like I said before, I can see their bond growing. I still don't know necessarily that they'll actually be like a man and wife, but I do absolutely believe that they will become very close. I do think that Blackthorn is going to end up caring for her, because he does have a soft spot for the Japanese women, because he sees the way that their culture is. He sees how the women are kind of treated like they're a second-class nature, and I think this bothers him. He doesn't agree with that, even though he really can't do anything about it. So I really like that moment, because it showed, for the first time, you could really see him. He's also being kind of vulnerable by giving away his weapons, but he's doing it, so that she can protect herself. So I really liked that whole sequence. I thought it was a beautiful moment, actually. And then an even more beautiful moment is that she ends up going and getting a samurai sword, which she says, I think, came from her father or her grandfather or something like that, and then she gives it to Blackthorn in return. And that's, I just thought it was so beautiful to see them sort of exchanging gifts. Excuse me. And so later on that night, Blackthorn ends up going out to the hot springs. He goes out later in the night, and of course Mariko ends up coming out, and she basically joins him in the springs. Well, actually, she don't join him in the spring here, I don't think. She just sort of talks to him while he's in the spring and whatnot. But it was a very cool scene to see. She lays the torches down on the fire. It just, visually, it was a very stunning scene, and I really enjoyed how it looked visually. It was really cool. And so, but later on that night, when Blackthorn does return to his quarters and Fuji ends up going to sleep, because they don't actually sleep together, he don't lay his hand on her, he don't hurt her or touch her in any way, but Mariko ends up coming in and actually ends up lying with him. So I just threw that in there. I had a feeling that would happen, because ever since Mariko lost her husband, I did suspect that, her and Blackthorn would start to get close. And now that we have Fuji in here, Fuji was ordered to be his wife, basically his wife, his caretaker, and, basically please him in whatever way he deems necessary. So I did predict very early on, which I'm sure you all predicted, that there would be sort of like a love triangle. I still do think that he's going to care for Fuji. I absolutely do think that. And I also think that if Blackthorn and Mariko's relationship, if it develops even further, I think that will actually cause conflict with Taranga. I don't think Yoshi will be happy about that, if I'm going to be honest, but I don't really know. We'll have to wait and see. But either way, the next morning, then it comes time for everyone here to give the clan from Ishiru, from Osaka, that group that came to arrest our buddy, who came to arrest Kashigi, I believe is how you pronounce his name, Kashigi. Now they're here now to see the demonstration, and just like we predicted, of course, Taranga's son ends up intervening. He comes down, he says, I demand compensation. He's basically just trying to make a name for himself. He's sort of trying to carve out his own path, and he ends up ordering a strike. He already has the demonstration set up so that the cannon fire will actually end up hitting the troops from Osaka, and it ends up becoming an absolute bloodbath. As you can see, body parts everywhere, people going crazy everywhere. But I'm going to quickly change the image for YouTube purposes, whatnot. And of course, you can look at the face here, Blackthorn and even Mariko. You can see just by the look of their faces that they know that this is going to be bad, and automatically this will start war. Now, overall, I absolutely love this episode. I thought it was a phenomenal episode. The only downfall about the episode now, moving forward with the story, is that this is really not going to work in Taranga's favor, because automatically Ishido will use this to his advantage. We know he's going to use this to his advantage because that's just the way that he is. We absolutely know he's going to blame Taranga's son, and he's going to say that this was actually a command by Taranga, not from his son. And I guarantee you he's going to say that this is an act of war, and then he will blame Taranga as being the one who started the war, which will then allow all the pieces to fall in his favor, because then everybody will side with him, because technically speaking, it's true, it was Taranga's son who started this. He opened fire on them with no warning, no hesitation. He acted completely on his own, even when Taranga's, one of Taranga's men, Kashigi, even when Kashigi tried to talk him down, Kashigi seemed like he was actually willing to go, seemed like he would, hand himself over to Ishido just for the sake of, saving face with Taranga. And then, of course, Taranga's son comes out and blows everybody up. So it was really cool to see that, but I can guarantee you this is going to be bad for Taranga in the long run. And so that was really cool to see. It was really cool to see. I really loved the moments between Fuji and Blackthorn, even though he does sort of have an affair. Well, I guess it's not really an affair because Mariko's husband died, I guess technically speaking, we don't really know if he died because we didn't actually see his body. We just seen him go inside of a building and get surrounded by a group of people. But you know what I mean? It seemed like he was. They implied that he's probably not going to survive and whatnot. So it was interesting to see Mariko go in and actually lie with Blackthorn. But I also kind of feel like, I don't know, I feel like there's going to be more to that, especially now that Fuji is here. And I really love those moments between Blackthorn and Fuji, how they exchange gifts. I love how she tacked up for him. And then after she tacked up for him, he gives her the guns to protect herself. She was willing to protect him, and now he's willing to protect her. And as you can see, even here in this visual, in that last image, you can even see, Blackthorn is actually using the swords that she gave him. He has them holstered onto his body. He's carrying the swords that Fuji gave him, and I just love that. Little details like that is what makes the story great, because it's not really technically a part of the story, but it's just a little small detail and it just works. It's a great way of sort of doing character development without having to spend a whole episode developing the character, if that makes sense. Already, just in just by them exchanging gifts, you can already see that there's a small bond starting to form. Of course, Mariko's relationship with him then has made a big step forward, but I do think Taranga will have a problem with this in the long run if he finds out. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't find out. Part of me thinks that this is the way the story. I feel like it happened for the sake of serving the story. I feel like this is just something else to sort of go against Taranga, to go against Blackthorn in the end. This relationship will not be deemed legitimate, I do not think, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. I don't know. For now, I really feel for Fuji the most. Fuji in terms of the love triangle and whatnot, and all that kind of stuff. I do think that, besides the fact that we know that Ishido is going to capitalize on Taranga's son making the first move, as we already said, Ishido will blame him and say that this was an act of war, but I do think that Taranga himself will also deem this as an act of war against his son. So it would be interesting to see Taranga see what happens between him and his son, because I could see him taking action against his son as well. Remember, Taranga is very intelligent, and he knows what this is going to mean moving forward in the future, but at the same time, he's also very honorable and whatnot. So it's going to be, I'm just very curious to see how this is going to affect their relationship, Taranga and his son, and also how is it going to affect the relationship also even with Taranga and Kashigi or Yabushigi. I don't know how to pronounce those names, but I'm just going to call him Kashigi. I'm very curious to see how that's going to play into effect too, because I could see Taranga potentially blaming him and being like, well, how was he even able to make this call? I sort of left this under your command, so to speak. He was sort of like the supervisor. He was sort of like the, the high authority here, almost like he was sort of here on behalf of Taranga. So I'm very curious to see how that will affect their relationship as well as Taranga and his son. But all in all, folks, I thought this was a phenomenal episode. Absolutely loved episode 4. Can't wait to move forward and see episode 5. Hopefully get that review up and on the go tomorrow. We're going to try to blow through Shogun as fast as we can now and whatnot. We also have to finish Avatar and all that good stuff. But overall, I absolutely love this episode and cannot wait to see where the series goes and how the series ends. So with that being said, folks, that's my review of episode 4 of Shogun. Let me know in the comment section below if you've seen it, and if you'd like to tell me why or why not. If you like this video, click that subscribe button, and until the next one, take care.